welcome to Top of the Hops. I'm your host, Mike Riker, and joining me for the second time, my first ever guest on Top of the Hops, the host of Busted Open, the great Dave Lagreca. Dave, thanks so much for joining me today.
What's up, Mike? So what are we drinking today?
Oh, glad you asked. So since it's a wrestling top five, I had to put out the You Can't Be Good, but Be Bald. Of course, the Road Warriors on the can. And this is from Hoof Hearted or Who Farted Brewing, depending how you want to say it. And I think you have one of their beers next to you with the Iron Sheik and Hulk Hogan. You've shown that before. So yeah, so I'm drinking this. This is an 8.5% double IPA. I know not one of your favorites, but I love this brewery. They always put out great material. So yeah, that's Hawk and Animal on the cover. So I saw this at my distributor. Dave, I had to get it. So
I get
it
it.
works
No,
for the show. What do you got?
It's the same one with me. It's from Two Villains Brewing in Connecticut, and it's called Ultimate Indulgence, and it's an IPA that is marshmallow and peanut butter flavored.
And
So
you're probably not. You're just gonna leave it there, not drink it, right?
I'm not drinking it. It's you know me. I'm a Bud Light guy. So, but that's cool. But I always support brewery. So I bought like two 6-packs of this.
Oh wow, okay.
So I have it in the fridge for any guests that come, and I like to always have a stock of beer available, especially since we're getting to the springtime now.
Yeah.
So yep.
Well, save one for me there, buddy, so I can try that.
Two Villains Brewing.
Nice, nice. Where in Connecticut is that? Where in Connecticut?
Hartford.
Oh, okay, Hartford. Yeah. So this one here, as you see, very light, very creamy, poured beautifully. So you can smell it. The smell is just unbelievable. It's tropical. So here's to you, man. Thanks so much for joining me today.
You got it, buddy.
All right. And wow, that is really good. That is very tropical, very hazy, and very juicy. So 8.5% doesn't taste like it. So that could go down very quick. So it's interesting that our cans both have wrestlers with face paint on them.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And so our topic today is a guy that very famous with face paint. And that's the guy who just retired this past Sunday at AEW, and that's the great Sting. And we're going to do our top 5 matches of Sting. And of course, I had you on doing top 5 Ric Flair matches, and that was difficult because there's like 50 or 60 we could have gone through. This one's a little different. Not saying Sting didn't have great matches, but they are, I don't want to say few and far between, but they're just they're there, but you have to really go through and find them.
Yeah, it's tougher in another way. Like you
yes,
said, like with Ric Flair, it's just very difficult because there's so many. With Sting, because he moved around a lot and he had a lot of different character changes and stuff like that. I think when it comes to Sting, it's more about the story that he was involved in than the matches. So it was a little bit tougher to come out with a top 5. And to be quite honest, I struggled with my top 5 for a couple of different reasons. So I think there's going to be a couple of matches we agree on, and then there's going to be a couple of matches that you're probably going to think I'm crazy, and I would agree with you. It's just it's more about the significance, I think, of some of the matches that I have on here than actually the quality of the match itself.
Yeah, some of them are more emotional than others. And you're right about it's more about the story and the character with Sting. I mean, obviously, the best story he ever did led to, I think, one of his worst matches with Hogan. That story was so great, Dave. And remember, he didn't wrestle for what, a year and a half. He was just coming down from the ceiling. So there was no matches he did. And then when that culmination of that pay-per-view happened, it was such a letdown, such a disappointment that it kind of, I thought, tarnished a little bit of what happened between that story. But to me, I think his best matches more happened when he was Surfer Sting, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think my list shows that, though. I think on my list, it's 3. I have WCW, I have TNA, and I have AEW. So
wow, okay,
3 different companies, and really, if you want, I mean, you could even say with WCW, NWA. So I don't know if you know, because I always look at the NWA different than WCW, even though it kind of morphed into WCW. So it really shows, the whole length of his career for the most part. And it's funny about Starrcade 97 because I've gone back and watched that match. I try, like every 6 or 7 years, I kind of dust off that match and watch it again because I really want to like it.
I know.
And and if it was just one thing, you could kind of let it pass. It's multiple. There's multiple reasons why that match didn't work. So it just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. Now they did get a big reaction with the finish when they were in the crowd. But even watching home, Dave was just like, what just happened here? Like, I don't understand. Because Nick Patrick wasn't a quick 3 count, number one. There was just so much confusion. It just and then of course the next night they basically stripped Sting of the title. So it was just a weird. It was just weird the way it happened.
And Mike, it's so funny because when you go back and watch that match, Sting's intro before he comes out, like with the cobweb and this, like it's amazing, and you're like, wow. And then he comes out like he just kind of staggers out there, instead of coming from the rafters.
Right. That was a big mistake.
And it just right from there, the disappointment continues. I mean, Hulk pretty much just 90% of that match, dominates that match, and then you get the 1, 2, 3, and like you said, it wasn't a quick count at all, and then the Bret Hart comes out, and then it's awful, and in every sense of the word. But you put that aside because I think we have some really cool matches we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about this earlier today. I want to get your take on it. You can argue, Dave, that listen, he's not on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling, but you can argue he's on the Mount Rushmore of 2 companies, and that is WCW and TNA. You can argue that. I'm not saying you would put him on TNA, but you can. I mean, he was there for a long time, Dave, and had some really good matches. He's definitely, to me, on the Mount Rushmore of WCW. But you could argue he's on the Mount Rushmore of TNA as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think I agree. He's on the Mount. We actually did a special show, me and Tommy Dreamer, about the Mount Rushmore at WCW leading up to Sting's last match. And he's definitely on the Mount Rushmore. And again, WCW, not NWA, but just WCW. I think he's number one. Like, I think he's the top guy. And then you mentioned TNA. You can make even the argument, Mike, and I know it's early. You may even put him on the Mount Rushmore of AEW because of the credibility, the respect factor, even some of the matches that he's had and how he's put Darby Allin over to another level. You may even make the case in the first 4 years, or now 5 years, but really 4 years that they've been on TV, that he's on the Mount Rushmore of AEW.
Yeah, I can't put him there, Dave, only because he's only been in tag matches. It was few and far between. But however,
undefeated.
Yes, no, I get it. I get all tag matches. But I will say this though, AEW did a terrific job in what they did with Sting, unlike what happened in 2015 with WWE, which I thought was just. I mean, listen, it was terrible what happened at WrestleMania. I know how much you hate that, and
Mike, we talked about it, and you were there with me. We watched that match together.
Yeah,
I remember you thought it was a fun match and like a nice closing of the chapter on the Monday Night Wars. From the moment I saw it, I hated it.
And I've come to your way of thinking, Dave.
Yeah,
it was just at the moment I got caught up in the moment. I did, but once that happened and you talked about how bad that was, you were exactly right. It's a hard match to watch when you see the NWO come out, when that was Sting was against the NWO the entire time.
And again, I know this is kind of getting off the topic, but it angered me even in the moment because we were in the press box,
right?
And a lot of members of like the quote unquote wrestling journalists in the press box, like they were cheering. I'm like, what is going on? Why are you cheering? This is awful,
right?
And you have the NWO, helping Sting. And then I get arguments from people like, well, Sting was in the NWO. He was part of the Wolfpack, and the Wolfpack was like the babyface NWO, which was weird at that time.
It was, and by the way, Hogan wasn't part of that, and neither was Hulk. Nash was, but Hogan Right.
It was an NWA babyface faction, which
Right.
and yeah, the regular black and white NWO was still heels. It was a weird, it was convoluted and weird. But
I don't like tomato. So was it tomato face Sting? So
yeah,
that's one of my favorite Stings. But
and
yeah,
then
I came around.
and then they have, you know, Triple H beats Sting,
Yeah.
and then 45 minutes later, you know, Triple H is in a suit with
Yeah.
his wife, bringing in Ronda Rousey. It was just like they buried Sting.
They did. They did.
And I'm very unhappy the way that Sting was treated, you know, like you said, in 2015.
Yeah, do you think it would have been different if Triple H was in the control?
I think it definitely would have been different. And, you know, it's funny. I've had this conversation with DDP, with Lex Luger, with Jeff Jarrett just recently on Busted Open, and they all agree that, you know, that there's no way that he should have been, you
No.
know, losing to Triple H. And honestly, Mike, Triple H and Sting shouldn't even have had a match at that WrestleMania.
No.
It should have been Sting and Undertaker.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, that was a missed opportunity. And it started off so great though, Dave. You know, you remember that Survivor Series when he came out to help Ziggler win that match. It started off so promising, and then just got let down at WrestleMania. You were right. Like I said, I did get caught up in the moment. I wasn't cheering like some of the other wrestling journalists, but I thought it was cool at the moment seeing those guys, and it was kind of cool. But you're right. Like, but looking back on it, like it didn't make any sense.
I did. It did. I remember watching it at the time. I was like, why are they coming? I go so
You're right.
angry. But yeah, but anyway, fitting way to end his career. And you know, we'll get into these top 5 Sting matches, Mike.
Well, let's do it. Let's start off with your number 5, Dave. What's your number 5 for the
My number
top
5, I struggled with. I actually I put it on, took it off the list, put it back on, took it off the list, and as a matter of fact, like 30 minutes before we started taping, I had it off. I had it off, and I had another match on, which, you know, if you want to know what it is, I could tell you later what I really wanted to put at 5. But I wound up putting Sting's final match at 5 from AEW Revolution. There's every reason in the world to hate this match. Like there's a laundry list of reasons not to like this match, but it was an emotional moment. It was Sting's last match. I loved even the way before his entrance, you know, where he's sitting in the theater watching the highlights of his career, which was really, really cool. They got me when his son first came out as Surfer Sting. I said, "Oh my God, he's coming out as Surfer Sting." I was like, ah! Like I was like a little kid, like, "Oh my God!" And then, you know, then you realize, and you know, and then his other son comes out as Wolfpack Sting, which
that should have been Crow Sting.
that should have been that should have been. But I understand AEW Sting is very much like Crow Sting.
That's true. That's true.
But you know what? It was such a cool entrance. That was a great way to do it. And then him getting the win, emotional win.
Yeah.
But you know, we could do a whole show on that match because and listen, I'm not on the bandwagon of hating on Darby Allin, but just there was things that happened in that match that were unnecessary.
Sure.
And really unnecessary because when you look back at that match, you shouldn't be talking about Darby Allin. You should be talking about Sting.
Right.
So, but that's how I'm going to remember it. I'm going to remember it as Sting's final match, sold out crowd, Greensboro Coliseum in North Carolina. Like it kind of full circle with the match that he had with Flair at Clash of the Champions. So at number 5, I have Sting and Darby Allin against the Young Bucks.
Yeah, it's not on my list, Dave. I thought the match was actually pretty good. I understand what you're saying about Darby, but I think Darby was kind of throwing it all out there for Sting. So I didn't have. I hear what you're saying, that spot with the chairs and the glass was a little much, but you know it is what it is. I expected that from Darby. I expected a very big high spot from him. It's funny. I wasn't crazy about the Bucks when they originally had it, but I actually thought it turned out to be pretty good. I thought it was well done, the whole story and everything. So I couldn't think of anybody else in a tag match with Sting and Darby other than the Bucks that could get that kind of heat. You know, so I thought it was actually well done at the end. So and thank God they made him win, because if he would have lost, listen, I know they would probably give him a standing ovation at the end of it, but it would have been kind of sour in my opinion, especially having the Bucks win it when they're so hated right now. So I thought they did a good job with it. And Greensboro, listen, they were into it. So it was nice seeing him, and that whole speech afterwards was great. And you're so right about that whole him sitting in the movie theater watching that was awesome. I thought everything that Tony Khan did for Sting, the whole entire run leading up to that match, and that match in particular, I thought they did a tremendous job with Sting.
Yeah, I do too. And then even like, and I know it got cut off, but his, him talking to the crowd afterwards, even Darby Allin, like just excited to be a part of it. He did a
Yeah,
lot for Darby Allin, and then seeing like all the legends at ringside and stuff. It was just Ricky Steamboat being involved, Ric
yeah,
Flair being involved, and then Mike, and we talk about this a lot, like JR and Tony Schiavone on commentary for that match.
right.
That was a big deal. And I thought Excalibur did a really good. I'm not the biggest Excalibur fan, but I thought he did a tremendous job in that match and for the whole show. So I have that at my number 5.
Yeah, not that I can't argue with that number 5. So, like I said, it's not on my list, but I can't argue it just because of the emotion. So my number 5 is also a tag match, but we're going back to 1991 Super Brawl, and that's Sting Luger versus the Steiners. I understand, you put top 5 matches, you don't want to put, a tag match on there, but I had to do this one, Dave, only because that I went back and watched that a couple of days ago. It's literally, I don't want to say a spot fest, but they're throwing everything at each other. It's power move after power move. And then Sting and remember, it's 1991. This is not 2020. He's going from one corner to another corner and just leaping up on Scott Steiner. And back then, we rarely saw babyface versus babyface. So this was an interesting tag match. So, and then of course you had the ending, which a lot of people didn't like. I did because it added to the story of Sting with Nikita Koloff with the chain, where Sting pushes Luger out of the way and he clocks, Sting. But I thought Sting was great in this match. Sting gets an incredible ovation when he gets tagged in. So does Scott Steiner, by the way. He gets an incredible ovation as well. This is when the Steiners were at their peak as well.
Yes.
So, but I just thought they were just doing power move after power move, the clotheslines, the power slams. Like I said, that one Sting spot. I just love this match, and it's not long either. It's 10 minutes. It felt like 10 minutes of their greatest hits. That's what
Yeah,
it felt like to me.
it's just over 10 minutes. And you know what, Mike, more about that one later.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. I hope I didn't steal your thunder. So, but let's get to number 4. Number 4, what do we got?
All right, number 4. This is another match that you and I were both together for, and it's not on a lot of people's list, but I loved it from the moment I saw it, and maybe a lot of it has to do with the fact that we were in house that night. But it's Sting Bully Ray for the TNA World Championship, Slammiversary 2013 in Boston. Um, this was unlike any Sting match. This was very Bully Ray aces and eights period type match.
Mhm.
But it was unlike anything that we saw from Sting, especially at this stage in his career. And it's funny, like when we're talking about this match was over 10 years ago.
Right.
When the guy just had his last match. This is over 10 years ago. And I remember watching this match in the moment saying, I can't believe Sting's doing all the stuff that he was doing, because at this point he's in his mid 50s
Mhm.
doing this. The exposed, the canvas being ripped off
That
and the
was great.
exposed boards.
Yeah.
And I really think, and a lot of people will bring up Bully Ray Jeff Hardy at Lockdown, but I felt in TNA's version, Bully Ray and TNA, I thought this was Bully's best match in his TNA career, and I think it was Sting's best match in his TNA career as well. Some will say the match he had with AJ Styles, but I think it's this match. So number 4, Sting Bully Ray Slammiversary in Boston, 2013.
Yeah, that was one of my honorable mentions, Dave. The only problem I had with that match was what happened at the end, with we had the aces and eights coming out, and we even talked about this on the air. Nobody came out for Sting. Like
Yeah,
no one came out for Sting. Like it just didn't. I just didn't like that. So, but the match itself was great. You mentioned the exposed pile driver on the boards, which was great. And you're right, Sting at that point wasn't having like the best matches. He was just kind of there. And Bully Ray kind of got something out of him in that match. Um, I love Bully Ray during this period too. I think this is the best Bully Ray during 2012, 2013. And you're right. I thought this match was better than the Jeff Hardy match because when you think about the Jeff Hardy match, you think about the ending. You don't think about what happened during the match because they were just having a wrestling match inside a steel cage.
Yeah, because they were both like I mean, we thought they were two baby faces
right
going at it. So that's the way they wrestled the match. And it's funny as you just said it, Mike, and about the end of the match, and for you, and I completely understand it. It took away from the match of the top 5 matches I have for Sting. There's a little something in each one of these matches that kind of gnaw at me a little bit.
Okay,
it's kind of funny that you said it with the AEW, like the Darby spot and kind of the no selling in that match. And then at number 4, you're right, the end and how Aces and Eights came out and then nobody came out for Sting. Each one of these matches, there's just a little bit of something that kind of takes just a little bit away from the match. And I could probably say that about all 5 matches.
Interesting. Well, I'm definitely going to say that about my number 4 match as well, which to me is a kind of a hidden gem. And that is from Nitro 1999, Sting Diamond Dallas Page. This was done in North Dakota. It was a title match. Now, this is the point where DDP just turned heel. So, and Sting had just come back a month earlier. Remember, he had just gotten beat up by Bret Hart with the bat.
Yep.
So he was out with concussions. He was out for a while. But Sting comes back. Unlike 97, Sting here in 99 is ripped. He looks great. He's tanned, which is the way Bischoff wanted. He's tanned and ripped. And they had this match at Nitro. And Dave, this match is fantastic. They fight all over the building. The crowd is so hot for this match. There's counter after counter. There's a spot where Diamond Dallas Page tries to put him into a tombstone. Sting reverses it. Diamond Dallas reverses it, and they drops him. And then the ending is great because Diamond Dallas tries to get him into a diamond cutter from the top rope, and Sting just sits down and gives him the Scorpion death drop into the pin, and the crowd goes apeshit crazy. They go about 15, 20 minutes. It's a pretty long match, but there's no like dead period in this match. This match really is very good. But like you said, there's always something that kind of takes away from it. And the crazy thing is this match happened in the middle of Nitro. This was not the main event because an hour later, they have another title match and they have Sting defend the title against DDP, Goldberg, and Kevin Nash, and DDP reclaims the title again. So it's like that never happened, which is criminal to me. You have this great match and it kind of gets lost. It also kind of gets lost too because it's 1999, not the greatest period for WCW. But I implore people to go out and watch this match. It's like I think it's April of '99, April 26th. It's in North Dakota. I implore everybody to go watch this match. To me, this is the best Sting match when he is the Crow.
It's funny you mentioned this match, Mike, because I haven't watched this match since Nitro in 1999. I haven't gone back and watched it. And you're 100% right. It's forgotten about because there's another championship match later on in the night. So it's completely forgotten about. Right. And I'm going to have to go back and watch it because I seriously have not watched it since Nitro in 99.
I watched it twice within the week because that's how good it was. And even Nicole, who's not, she's a wrestling, fan, but, a casual fan, she sat there and watched it. Wow, this is really good. And so, like I said, it's fantastic. And I think the crowd definitely helps it. It's North Dakota. It's sold out. And the crowd's into everything they do. And that definitely adds to the match.
Okay, that's a good one.
All right, number 3. What do we got?
All right, number 3. And this is one that you just mentioned. And it's the tag match from Super Bowl 91. And it's funny, you and I had a conversation, but we didn't want to give away too much. And you mentioned to me, the one thing you mentioned to me was this tag match. Mm-hmm. And I did not have it on my top 5.
Okay.
I just recently sat down and interviewed Lex Luger. And I don't know if I asked him during the interview or before the interview, but we spoke about this match. And
It was definitely before the interview because I didn't even see
okay,
the
yeah, we
interviews.
talked about this match, and I was like, "That's funny." I said, "A buddy of mine, it's one of his favorite Sting matches." He goes, "It's by far my favorite match with Sting." So earlier today, I went back and I watched it, and you're right, it's just over 10 minutes. But you talk about a greatest hits match. It's unbelievable. And even the end is unbelievable. The crowd is super hot.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think this is Sting at his ultimate peak. Like if you were gonna say when was the peak of Sting, I would say 91 Sting. This was, I think, when he was like just at his ultimate peak for
Right.
me. And I watched this match and my jaw almost dropped how good this match is, how physical the match is, but also, like you said, storyline wise, I just thought it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it is great. I mean, just like I said, the story, and like I
But
said
the right
before,
guys won. The
yeah,
right
oh,
guys won.
absolutely. They were the best tag team in wrestling at that point, and it wasn't even close, Dave. Like they
Yeah.
were wrestling in Japan. They were collecting titles all over the place. And this was the first time they kind of got a little threatened a little bit, even though Sting and Luger were not the usual, you know, tag team that tagged all the time. But these were two of the top baby faces in the company at the time. So seeing the top two baby faces against the top babyface tag team, like I said, back in '91, you rarely saw that. And to have them do that clothesline that Luger does on Rick Steiner is just incredible.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
And the Steiners get, and I know it sounds crazy because they are celebrated, but the Steiners are probably the most underrated, underappreciated tag team.
they're the
Because
best wrestling tag team I've ever seen, Dave.
you know what, Mike? I can't argue with you.
Yeah.
And I know it was like a short run. It seemed like it was a short run anyway. It's just like I don't think enough people talk about the Steiners when they talk about the greatest tag teams of all time.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a short one. It just seemed like, I think their run in WWE kind of gets lost a little bit. And then they come back and they have some decent matches with Nash and Hall. But you mentioned 91 Sting, but 89 to 92 Steiners is just go back and
But
watch
that's
them.
the that
They're
that
brutal.
80 that 89 to 92 is just, and I guess it's not that long because if you really look at when the Four Horsemen were at their peak,
Right.
if you really look at a lot of these tag teams, they weren't around. The Shield, even you could look back at that faction, they weren't around a very long time. So you're probably right. It's longer than what I thought it was. But when people talk about the greatest tag teams, they rarely mention the Steiners. And Luger too. I think Luger is underappreciated
Yeah.
and undervalued in a lot of ways. So this tag match it's unbelievable. And I know like it's difficult to put a tag match in any wrestler's top, but Mike, I have two tag
I know.
matches in the top five.
I know. I struggled to put this because it was a tag match, but it's so good. And sometimes you have these great tag matches, either maybe a team stands out or one guy stands out. Dude, all four of these guys stand out. They all do their greatest hits. They all do their power moves, and they all four are tremendous in this.
And I think if I remember that was the first Super Brawl
It
card.
was a super. Yep, the
Yeah.
first Super Bowl.
So,
Yep, yep. So yeah, that's great number three. So my
oh,
number
Mike,
three.
Mike, before you go on,
Uh-oh.
okay, before you go on, because I don't know what your number three is going to be.
Okay.
To me, the top two matches, there's no doubt what the
You know,
top two. Like,
I
there's
did.
no argument, there's no debate. So before you draw your,
I might disagree with you.
all right,
I think there's one match that there's no debate. I'm not sure if there's two.
to me, there's two.
Okay.
So I'm throwing that out before you give your number three, just in case it's is your three and not your two. To me, there's no doubt about the top two.
Okay. I think there is doubt, but let's.
Okay,
So my number three is from 1992. Is that part of the your no doubts?
it's not.
Okay, so there you go. So my number three is from Beach Blast 1992, and it's Sting Cactus Jack. I love this match because it puts Sting in a different comfort zone. You mentioned that with Bully Ray in 20, what was it, 2015 we went?
2013.
2013, yeah. So this was back then where Sting wasn't having these type of matches. And Cactus Jack, if you remember the story, Cactus Jack, remember brought out the box, and
Yeah.
then Abdul the Butcher came out, and then that led to the feud of Sting and Cactus Jack and Abdul. It was a little wonky, a little bit, because Cactus Jack was basically a kind of lower mid carder at that point. But this match, I think, elevated Cactus Jack even too. Like nobody knew of Cactus Jack except for maybe the fall he took against Mil Mascaras at one of the Clash of Champions. But this match, you're like, oh my god, this guy can actually wrestle a little bit. But it puts Sting in the comfort zone, in an uncomfortable spot here. And what I love about this match, Dave, is that this happened in June. 3 weeks later, he was going to have a match with Vader for the championship. And the commentary is Jim Ross and Jesse the Body Ventura. And Jesse, throughout the entire match, kept saying, why is Sting doing this? Why is Sting, because remember, this is a Falls Count Anywhere on the Gulf Coast. It wasn't Falls Count Anywhere in the building. It was Falls Count Anywhere on the Gulf Coast. So they could have been on the beach somewhere in Mobile, Alabama. But Jesse kept saying, why is Sting doing this? He's got a match with Vader coming up. Why is he doing this? And when Sting lost to Vader, they went back to this match saying this was the cause of why Sting lost. Because there's some brutal stuff in here. Typical Cactus Jack hardcore match where, they're bumping all over the place. Sting has, is diving into, railings and into ring posts. I just love this match. Like I said, it's a hardcore match. You mentioned 91 Sting. I think it's 91, 92 Sting. And remember, that's when Ric Flair left. So I think Sting, listen, I know WCW from a financial standpoint was in a bad shape, but from a wrestling standpoint, I don't think Sting was any better than during this time period.
I agree with you. And I think a lot of it had to do with Flair being gone because he really stepped up because he was the guy.
Right.
And I really feel like even when Ric Flair came back, he was never the same Ric Flair. That's that period where, like even when he did great things in the WWF, but when he came back, I don't think they ever used him the correct way. Sting completely different. So you could see where Ric Flair's career in WCW went and where Sting's career in WCW went. And I think that's kind of like that's the point where I think things started to change for both those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. But like I said, I love this as a hardcore match, and it's one of those rare matches where Sting doesn't get over, but Cactus Jack got over that night.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And you can say that about some of these matches, matches too. All right, now my number two.
Here we go.
My number two, now, without a doubt, it's not even close, Mike. These are the two Sting matches that I've watched more than any other match. And whenever I think of Sting in this time period, and what it is about, I mean, there's like a 5-year difference between these two matches, between my number two and my number one. So I don't know if that is different than your number two.
It could be.
Okay.
I think it is actually.
Okay, because my number two is Sting and Vader from
Which
Super
one?
Brawl 3. Super Brawl 3.
I have a different one, but go ahead.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
This is
that's the strap match, correct?
That's the strap match. Now,
great match.
It's I know it's a little wonky. It's the White Castle.
White Castle of Fear.
Right? It was White. I'm trying to remember. White Castle of Fear strap match. I think it was called, which is definitely wonky and definitely.
Well, mine's wonky too. I'll get to that in a second. Mine's a wonky little title too.
But I guess we've said this several times, Mike, about this is a different type of match for Sting, but we've said this now 3 or 4 times during the show, so maybe it wasn't. But just Vader again. Vader is another guy, underappreciated, undervalued, and I think it's because of the way he was used in the WWF when he went to WWF. But this was to me like Vader in his prime. Mm-hmm. This was like badass Vader, and it really brought out badass Sting. This match and another match that we're talking about where Sting, didn't win the match. You know, it's another
Right.
one of these matches where Sting does not win, but even though he didn't go over, he got over even more.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just a match that throughout the years, I had it on VHS, I had it on DVD, it's on Peacock. You know, it's one of those matches now throughout the last like 30 years of my life that I always feel like I gravitate towards. And if I made a top 5 matches of Vader, this match would be on the top 5 Vader matches as well.
It's funny because you can listen. People talk about Flair being Sting's greatest opponent. You can argue Vader was Sting's greatest opponent.
And that's why, like Mike, I the reason I threw this out, that to me it's definitive. These two. The reason I said that is I had a feeling you weren't going to have one of these two matches on there, and I have a feeling that your number 2 match is a Vader match as well. Vader and Sting is a lot like, to me, Flair and Steamboat. Now, not
Yes.
in that, not in the way that they wrestled, but like my number 1 Flair match isn't Flair and Steamboat, but probably his greatest opponent was Steamboat. I
Right.
agree with you. I think Sting's greatest opponent was Vader.
Yeah, and as like you said, it's Vader at his best. It's not Vader in WWE. For those who have not watched Vader in WCW, I implore you to go back and watch this because he is absolutely tremendous and brutal.
And
Uh,
scary,
and
like
scary.
scary.
Yeah, very much so. And then listen, I love the strap match. So it actually came down to I didn't want to put 2 Sting invaders. I guess I could have. I want to kind of vary it up a little bit. I could easily put this White Castle of Fear strap match on there. But my number 2 is also Sting Vader, but from a different match. But if you watch that match, the welts on Sting from the strap, even on Vader, from that match. That match is so brutal, Dave. And sometimes when you think of strap matches, you think that's just gonna be boring. This is one of those strap matches. They're kind of flying all over the place.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, so I listen, I can't argue with you, but to me, my favorite Sting Vader match comes from Starrcade 1992.
I get
Uh,
it.
and the reason why is because he had lost the match to Vader and kind of like he was kind of squashed a little bit when he lost the title at the Great American Bash. Because again, they talk about that Cactus Jack match, and Sting got his moments, but that was like 80-20 Vader, and Vader squashed him. So this match was kind of like Sting. What can Sting do to beat Vader here? So this was you mentioned wonky. This was called the King of Cable match, which who the fuck knows what the hell does that mean? But listen, it was at the Omni in Atlanta, which was great. And so you have this match between Sting and Vader, and it's like, what can Sting do to pin Vader? And he's putting out all the stops, the suplexes that Sting puts on Vader in these matches, and this match specifically is incredible. Like he's picking up 450 pounds and just dropping him on his head, and then he does this DDT off the top rope. The match itself is just incredible. I understand why he said the White Castle of Fear match, but to me, this was about Sting trying to overcome Vader for finally one more time because he couldn't. He had lost to him at Great American Bash. He had lost him in tag matches even before that. So this was the match finally. How can Sting finally defeat Vader? And he finally did. And this is why I love this match so much, just because of the story.
Yeah, I get it. It's one of my honorable mentions, Mike, and I can understand that. And yeah, and that was the one match that I was struggling with. I wanted to remove, if I was going to take out my number 5, which was the Sting's final match, it would have been Starrcade 92 Vader.
Yeah, I just love it, and but you can't go wrong with either match. Like every Sting Vader match is incredible. So even the match that he got squashed on, it's a brutal beating that Sting takes. So
So
that's my number
before we
2.
get to our number
Yeah,
1, I think the only match so far that we agreed on was the tag match.
yeah. Although I think that's going to change here. We'll see. Number 1, what do we have?
It's the Clash of the Champions.
Yeah,
Sting, Flair, Greensboro Coliseum, 1988. I mean, it's by far Sting's best match.
yeah,
Uh, Sting is incredible in it. It's it's TV time remaining 45 minutes. And I love even going into that match where they had standby matches, and Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone talked about what the standby matches were. What was it? Larry Zbyszko versus oh geez, was one of the standby matches. Oh, Shane Douglas. Larry
Shane
Zbyszko,
Douglas,
Shane
right.
Douglas was like one of the standby matches. And it went 45 minutes, and you could have told me
Was
that
that for the Western States Heritage
it
Championship?
was for the Western States charity. I think you're absolutely right. And go back and watch that match. If you don't look at the clock, you could have told me that match was 20 minutes and I would have believed you. It went by so fast. I just love the story that they told. I love the fact that, again, this is why Schiavone and Jim Ross are so great on commentary. There's one point where, Sting chops Flair and Flair goes over the top rope. And Tom, and if you remember, NWA at that time, over the top rope, automatic disqualification. Tommy Young waves it off. And and Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone go into the explanation that, hey, official's discretion, he's throwing out the disqualification because of the importance of the match. Wow. And there's one point too where Sting is cradling Flair, and Flair is grabbing the second rope, and Tommy Young kicks his arm off the rope.
Yeah.
It's like what? But again, the explanation by Schiavone and Jim Ross, they explain why he's doing it. Time limit, time is running out. This is it's a phenomenal match. But the one thing that bothers me is the judges.
Right. I get it.
So you have Gary Juster, who they explain, I think at that point he's the NWA booker in Baltimore.
Right.
Okay, we're in Greensboro. Okay, let's use the booker in Baltimore.
Okay, I was okay with that one. Go ahead.
Sandy Scott. Okay, get it. NWA history. Totally understand it. Then you get the kid from the Wonder Years, Eddie Haskell,
who didn't watch the match, by the way.
No, because he's too busy looking at the next judge, which was Patty Mullen.
Which I don't blame him, by the way.
Who, a little trivia here, Patty Mullen went on to be Frankenhooker.
But see, and by the way, you have a great podcast on this match with Tommy Dreamer and Jonathan Hood, which I listened to. And I love the way you guys broke it down. So, and you guys kind of opened my eyes to that match. I'm going to continue talking because this is also my number one. So, might as well just continue the conversation. Yeah. So, Jonathan brought up a great point. I didn't think of it at the time, but he was right. It was okay having her there because it was kind of like she was there to kind of go for Flair to kind of maybe set things up, maybe as a kind of a swerve a little bit, maybe. But you mentioned that like I said, Haskell and Hervey, who, like you said in the podcast, they never went to.
They never went to him, and then
right.
Yeah. And then, and Jonathan Hood said, and I honestly seen this match so many times, I don't think it's true that they weren't actual judges; they were guests. That only Sandy Scott, Gary Juster, and Patty Mullen were judges.
Right.
That Eddie Haskell and Jason Hervey were guests and not judges. If that's true, then why were they sitting at the judges' table?
Right.
And why were they showing them watching the match? And Jason Hervey was taking notes.
He was
in the match.
Yeah, so, I gotta go back to the introductions and see how they introduced it, because I don't remember, to be honest. I've watched this match 100 times, but I don't remember how they introduced those two guys. But the Patty Mullen stuff is interesting because, and I think Schiavone's the one that said it on his podcast, they were actually dating at the time. So, she was a Playboy playmate, and so it was interesting. If you watch that match, you probably thought that maybe she was there to kind of vote for Flair to see what, to kind of, no matter what happened in the match, she was there to vote for Flair.
Well, and they show it after she votes for Flair. She has a big smile on her face, and she gives a little wink and a hand, like a hand gesture to Flair. Right. So it's like, So, and they never really played up on
No,
that.
they didn't. They didn't.
They didn't really play up on that after that, but so that's a little wonky to me, but it doesn't take away from the match because even if you didn't have the judges, it would have been a time limit draw anyway.
Right. Right.
So, and Ric Flair would have retained the championship. It's a great match. It's hard hitting. I mean, and Sting with his high fly. It's fantastic. Flair is tremendous in that match. And the crowd's hot now. You know the way it's lit, you don't see the whole arena now. You go back, I've done some research on it. It said the attendance that night was only 6,000, which I
Interesting.
find hard to believe because it looked like it was a big crowd and it
Right.
sounded like it was a big crowd. But supposedly there was only 6,000 people in the arena that night, which I
Hmm.
find odd because the NWA was pretty hot at that time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially in Greensboro,
Yeah.
so I'm surprised they didn't draw a bigger crowd. But you're right. I love this match. I mentioned on our Flair episode, it's the perfect match where someone puts someone over like Flair did with Sting. And I remember going to that match, Dave. And I was a Sting fan. Remember, he came from Mid South, so I knew Sting from the Blade Runners. So, but even during that time, it was like he was still kind of a mid card guy, an up and coming guy, maybe in the future. And when this match happened, I'm like, all right, Flair Sting, this should be interesting. And it just turned to like, oh my god, this guy's great. And what I love about the match was even though Flair, could get the time limit draw and retain the title, it felt like Sting was the one in control. It felt like Flair was the one trying to hold on, trying to hang on at that last second. You remember the ending of that match. Sting's got Flair in that Scorpion Deathlock, and they're counting down. Seven, and did he quit? No, he let the time limit draw happen. So I just love the way. And listen, they keep going back to this match. Where was Sting's last match in Greensboro? Who was there? Ric Flair. So this
And
match
and,
gets
and
talked
on
about so
commentary,
much.
Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone,
There you go.
just like his last match, like it went full circle. It's a tremendous match, and this goes back to like what we talked about with Flair. This match isn't in my Ric Flair top 10 matches of all time list, and that doesn't take anything away from the match at all, even though
No,
it's things number one.
it was my number two, Bus Dave. It was my number two for
It's
Flair.
yeah, so there you go. And this match, and I don't know about you, but that night I watched Clash of the Champions. I
I
did
did
not
not.
watch WrestleMania.
I
So
watched Rust. I watched WrestleMania by tape Clash of Champions and watched it the next day, and was just in awe of what happened because, like I said, I was a big Sting guy from the UWF days, Mid South days, and watching him go 45 minutes with Flair was just unbelievable because, like I said, Sting was not, it was Flair, Wyndham, it was Flair, Flair and Dusty. Sting was kind of the up and coming guy, and this was the first time that Flair kind of put someone over, even though he didn't win.
and one thing that's and younger fans wouldn't know this, but back in the day, Mike, they would never go to a commercial break during a match.
Right.
They just wouldn't do that. Like, and go back to any show at that time. I don't remember any show cutting to break during a match. It just never happened. It would be like, cutting to a break during live action of a football game. You just wouldn't do it. And that show, they did not cut away from the match. Like that match was 45 minutes commercial free.
Right.
They did not. The commercials were during in between the matches. So kudos to TBS. They did not cut away not one time during that match for a commercial break.
Yeah, it was very rare seeing it was a pay-per-view quality event. I mean, remember Luger and Wyndham won the tag titles that night over Arn and Tully. That was a pay-per-view event on free TV, which you
Yes.
rarely got. So you get that sometimes from Saturday Night's Main Event, but nothing like NWA did that night.
No,
Yes.
it was a great show, and again, that was a great time.
Yeah.
I know. Like I think your favorite year for wrestling was '87, and that's
Right.
just coming right out of '87. And that was a great period for pro wrestling for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great. Like I said, I agree with you at number one. So, what's your favorite Sting match? You mentioned, Dave, that you had some honorable mentions that you want to get into. Let me hear some of those.
Well, I had two, and one being Starrcade '92 with
Yep.
Vader. And then the other one was Sting and the Great Muta from Great American Bash 1989.
Yeah.
You know, that's a match that's kind of forgotten about over time as well. That's a great match. And I agree with you, Mike. I feel like when you look at match quality, there's no doubt that Sting, Surfer Sting, that period, like, you know, 88 to 90, 92, that period right there, 80, 88, 93, to me was the best period of Sting's career.
Yeah, I like that Sting Muta match. My only problem is the ending of that match, and it was so hyped up. You know, seeing Sting and Muta, I thought it was a little disappointing. But if you want to talk about tag matches, this was on my honorable mention too. Go back and watch Sting and Flair against Luger against Funk and Muta. I think it was a Clash of Champions right before Flair and Funk in their I Quit match. I believe
Yes.
that's a great. It's all over the place. It's another great tag match that Sting's involved in. So but that Sting Muta match was good. I just thought the ending kind of took away a little bit of what happened between Sting and Muta. But it's funny, you know, Sting. You know, remember he tore his ACL. Remember, was it 90, early 90, 91, 92 is some of his best stuff. It's crazy, you know. So, but what's your top five? Please comment down below. Dave, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
You got it, buddy. This is fun, man.
All right, take care, guys.